Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn. Today's video is going to be a book review of a book that I recently read called Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. This is the first book in the Farseer trilogy. So I'm going to go through, give an overview of my thoughts on the book, and I'll go deep into the characters and into some of the pacing and the plot stuff, but I won't give any spoilers. This is going to be a completely spoiler-free review. But to begin with, I wanted to tell you that this was a tough book to get into because I didn't really know what I was expecting. The title alone, Assassin's Apprentice, makes you think someone's going to be learning about the trade of being an assassin, which this book is about. But there's kind of two camps you could fall into this. You can have the camp where it's almost exclusively YA, and where it's they're a teenager learning this stuff, or you have the more mature adult-themed version of this. And both are interesting. I typically prefer the adult version. The first half of the book really felt YA, but the second half of the book changed. The second half of the book felt like it was a bit more in the adult version. Part of the reason for this issue was this is a first-person narrative book, and you don't see too many first-person adult fantasy books. They're out there. I know they're there, but typically the adult fantasy is third-person, whereas young adult is first-person, typically. So that's where you get a lot of the feeling of this being a different type of book out of its own genre. Some of the strong points of this book include its main character, Fitz. Boy, does Robin Hobb make you feel for Fitz. He has gone through so much in his life, and he's still so young, and yet none of it's his fault. He just keeps getting put into the wrong place at the wrong time, and it's just so tough for him to finally get a break. And this book, he starts out being taken to the castle. He is the illegitimate child of the prince, and nobody wants him. The king realizes he needs him, and he's going to use him for something, but nobody else really wants him around. So he kind of just gets passed around and sent to people that, I guess we'll take care of him, is kind of their view of things. And thus he spends 200 pages meandering, being, treated terribly, forced to live in stables, forced to work really hard despite the fact that he's the son of royalty. And then a little way into the book, about halfway through, he starts getting trained by the king's assassin, and that's where the main plot takes off. And I'll say that up until the first halfway point, every chapter I wanted to DNF the book. I don't really DNF that many books unless I just can't stand it, but this book, every chapter I was like, I didn't like that chapter. Maybe the next chapter I'll like. And then, and it kept repeating and repeating until the halfway point. And the halfway point in this book is great. So the halfway point is when the plot really kicks up a notch, and you kind of get the feeling of where the book is going. The problem with the first half is you're just meandering, so you don't know, much like the character, you don't know where anything's going. But the second half of the book, you do know where it's going, and it gets very interesting, particularly the last 100 pages. The last 100 pages are lots of action, lots of epic storytelling, and it all just gets wrapped up really quickly, and I really enjoyed the last 100 pages. Really the whole last second half of the book. But going back to what I was talking about with Fitz is that he's actually kind of a bland character. The things that Robin Hobb does are not necessarily coming from Fitz, but they're happening to Fitz. And what Robin Hobb's able to do is make you empathize with Fitz, but you can put yourself in his situation because he doesn't have that much of a personality. I would equate this quite a bit in the way to how J.K. Rowling wrote Harry Potter. Harry Potter has a lot of traits, but he is kind of a blank slate in a lot of ways, and the audience is kind of seeing the Harry Potter world through his eyes. You are seeing this whole world through Fitz's eyes. As a result, you have an unreliable narrator who doesn't know everything. So a lot of things you're picking up as the character Fitz is picking them up too. Going into some other portions of the book, one thing that is extraordinarily interesting about this book is the political intrigue. Robin Hobb deals with political intrigue so well. Her descriptions of the backstabbing that occurs in the world, her descriptions of how certain people are trying to get on top are interesting. You don't really see bad guys. There are these bad guys from the Red Ships, the Red Ship Raiders, who are raiding the shoreline of the six duchies, but they're not really fleshed out as villains. You don't really see much. You don't have a single character who is a villain. As a result, the villainous characters are the people who are trying to stop Fitz. And so you have people like Regal, who is very villainous towards him, and others. And there are some very good guy characters as well, but she writes that political intrigue so well. And what I think is the best part of that political intrigue is that Robin Hobb does in 400 pages what other authors such as Robert Jordan and maybe even George R.R. Martin and even Brandon Sanderson take a full 700-page book to do, is tell a lot of political backstory and yet still be very economical in space. And so as a result, this packs a wallop for how little a book it is. It's only about 430 pages. Another thing that's, I think, really good about this book is the way that, as a first-person narrative, you get into the understanding of other characters. I really enjoyed reading about people like King Shrewd, who I thought was very tough to read him, but when I could read him, it was a lot of fun. I thought Burrich was excellent. I'm not sure the pronunciation there, but I'm pretty sure I'm right about it. You also had characters like Chivalry, who we didn't get much of in the book, but you're told a lot about him, so you get to understand what he was like, even though he's not present. And then you have characters like Regal, who just make your blood boil, and you have people like Chade, who just frustrate you throughout, despite the fact that he's trying to do the right thing. There is a moment in the first half of the book where Chade asks Fitz to do something, and Fitz does not know what he should do. And it is the toughest choice he thinks he'll ever have to make. Except it isn't the actual toughest choice in the book, but at the time it's the toughest choice he's ever had to make. And you just feel for him in that portion of the book. And there is no clear answer. You don't know whether he should or shouldn't do the thing. And I just thought that was brilliant writing on Robin Hobb's part. And so I really enjoyed a lot of this book, but I do have some complaints. As I mentioned, the first portion of the book is very, very slow, and it takes a while to get in. But I think the second half makes up for it, kind of. It's hard to recommend the book because of that difficulty. If you're a hardcore fantasy fan, it's going to be easier to get in than if you're not used to fantasy. Another criticism I have of the book is that while it doesn't use a lot of language, which I do not like when books use a lot of swear words. There was a certain swear word referring to Fitz being an illegitimate child that was used over and over and over again. And in fact, throughout the book, that's essentially his name. And I feel that Robin Hobb didn't need to do that, use that word, especially as often as she did, but she still could have conveyed the way people viewed him. Obviously, Robin Hobb has a different worldview than I do on this type of thing with swearing, but it was just so hard for me to, every time that word came up, I was just getting more and more frustrated. It was dipping more into Game of Thrones and less into what I like Shannara or like Wheel of Time, in the way that it handled language. But, as I said, those are pretty small problems with the book. As a whole, this book really makes me want to know what the future is, and it leaves doors open. And there's one door that you will read with the book and you'll be like, does this happen? You need to know if this happens by the end of the trilogy. And that question alone makes me want to finish the trilogy, even though I had some parts of the book that I didn't enjoy as much. There were some training moments where it felt kind of too YA-ish, but as I said, the last portion of the book was so fantastic that it just makes me want to continue on with the series. But regarding my overall thoughts on the book, I would give the book a 7.2 out of 10. So a decently well done book, but I had problems with it. I will also say regarding the version that I read the mass market paperback of it, I think that this cover could have been done better. I think that if it was more pastel designed and less photographic, and also if it didn't look like a movie poster, instead looked more like an epic fantasy cover, like something like The Wheel of Time, I think that it would have helped more. I know that the hardcover, the original, had some Michael Whalen art, which is fantastic. But yeah, the artwork on this one isn't as great. But the artwork for the sequels, I think, look a lot better. And I'm very excited to read those. And I will most likely be reading those in the next couple of months. So keep an eye out for those reviews. But if you liked this video, please like it on YouTube and share it to your friends and subscribe. And did you like Assassin's Apprentice? Leave a comment. I will respond. I would love to read your comments. If you didn't like it, tell me what you didn't like about it. I might agree with you on it. But until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.